There's no such thing as a permanently healthy organization. There are many, many examples of companies that have been absolutely wonderful and then have fallen on more difficult times. Question is, can you then survive, right? There are going to be cycles, but do you have the capacity in your organization to change and to respond to those cycles? If the answer is no, then we know what happens in industries. Someone else takes your place. If the answer is yes, you have the ability to fight another day and produce long-term earnings for your shareholders and meaning for your employees. So those two things are the core. You're not going to be a winner unless you can innovate. And unless you innovate, you're not going to be able to manage through the multiple cycles of change. How does health vary? If I think of the 2012 Olympics in London, right? Imagine three people coming to that, three competitors, a heavyweight boxer, a table tennis player, and a swimmer. I think we can safely assume they're all healthy, but there are very different patterns of health. And we found the same thing in our research. You know, a healthy steel mill doesn't feel the same as a healthy advertising agency, right? So yes, they need to be clear about their direction, they need to be able to execute, and they need to be able to innovate and renew over time. But the particular things that they need to work on in terms of muscle mass or in terms of resilience and persistence varies. Now, if you accept that notion, then the job of leaders is to understand strategically where are we going. You know, what's tomorrow going to call for from us in terms of our pattern of health? And then how can we adjust to develop the right, we call it an archetype, but the right pattern or menu or set of combinations of the healthy components of an organization to be able to outperform in the future. And we found there are four that tend to come out a lot. There are some of the winners that really focus on execution. We call them execution edge. It's a game of inches. They drive forward every day and they just out-execute the hell out of their competitors. There are some companies that really focus on the market focus. They just understand their customers and tomorrow's customers better than anyone else in their industry. Of course, they want to be great at execution as well, but the distinctive capacity about them is their market focus. The third one is knowledge core. Right, so organizations that leverage knowledge, they develop knowledge, they get it around the system, they utilize that better than anyone else. And the fourth and final one that we've observed, we call leadership driven. So this is perhaps the one that's hardest to get a grip on, but it's organizations where the development of leadership capacity, the leadership engine in place, allows them to manage a wide range of things, wide range of parts of businesses, in a way that gets synergy out of those multiple elements of the business.
So this ability to differentiate, you know, there are multiple ways to win. The ballerina does look different than the boxer. You have to decide strategically what event are you taking part in. But that ability to differentiate between winning recipes is, we think, kind of a breakthrough thought in this whole idea. The last thing, Gary, is, you know, this notion of what ingredients work well together is something we do feel when we look at some of the academic literature that has come before us has been missed. And let me give you a practical example. Say you want to motivate your workforce. So you have a number of practical things you can do to motivate your workforce. So number one, you can rewards and incentives, you know, and give them money for this or whatever the right incentive is. You know, number two, you can create opportunities for people. Number three, you can kind of motivate them through the value set of your organization. And number four, you can motivate them through really inspiring leaders, right? And there might be a longer list than that, but let's just take those four. Now, you can quantitatively understand, depending on how well you do each of those practices, how much motivation are you going to get? We can do those numbers, and you know what it turns out, exactly as academic literature says, the rewards and incentives, you know, kind of contrary to what we naturally gravitate to, it's just less powerful when you're working towards motivation than these other things. So instead of focusing on rewards and incentives, you should do more on inspirational leadership, you should do more on creating opportunities, you should do more on values, right? That's where the literature stops. What the literature doesn't do is it doesn't say, but what's the interplay between motivation and how you're trying to get innovation, and how you're trying to coordinate and do risk management, and how you're trying to get collaboration? When you put all that together, if you have a culture of internal competition instead of a culture of collaboration, for example, it's a choice you make. You then look at, if you have internal competition and rewards and incentives, how powerful is that combination to motivate a workforce? It turns out you go from kind of 50% probability to 80% probability, far more likely to motivate your workforce than if you combine an internally competitive environment with any of those other drivers of motivation. It's a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of cycle. So we've done that across 30 plus management things you can do, very practical things, and said, what are these combinations, what are these recipes, so to speak, of success? So not talking about ingredients. You can have great ingredients, best salt in the world. You put too much of it in, it's not a good recipe.